Mia Gorbo Halachamish, Kon Vahar Kochecha, who may ascend the mountain of Adonai, who may stand in God's holy place. We hear now summon the confirmation class of 5782 to Kabbalat Torah, receiving Torah anew. Was anybody here a confirmand when they were a child? Raise your hand. Was anyone a confirmand and is over 40? If you're a confirmand and you're over 40, and we're going to be very gender insensitive, and you consider yourself a gender-identified female, please come up and share in kindling the festival lights. Joe Breen, excited? Come on up, all of you. Striking, yeah, there you go.
I gotta do the next one. Gotta do the other one. Yeah, sure. We join together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kirshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu
We rise for Kiddush.
We raise our cups. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. L'chaim. You can all take a seat. You're done. I'll just put it here. Drink it.
The 10th grade journey we call confirmation is all about confirming what it is about Jewish being and believing that we can hold on to that ultimately helps hold us up. And when the world is a little bit meshugana, or more than just a bit, the search means all the more. This year, every Tuesday night, like clockwork, we have explored Jewish thinkers of the past 2,000 plus years, trying to understand how each offer a different vision of what God might be, what our purpose in the world might be, and how that comes together to make sense of our world. Of course, this journey becomes invaluable when our world does not quite make sense. When the big questions we cannot help but ask have no apparent answers and our life purpose isn't always all that clear. For then, each week's discovery becomes a quest for each confirmand, for all of us, to integrate that covenant thinker with their own life understanding, which is why I can say without question, these are not the same 20 sacred seekers that I started with back in September. Sharing their insights tonight, all of us will see through their questions, their struggles, their variety of perspective, they have found new ways to understand our world and even how God works, and sometimes doesn't. Gifting us with their Sinai statements, these 20 confirmands become our teachers, helping us engage in the struggle as well with all the craziness we daily confront, hopefully helping us to let God in.
Where is God in the course of our day-to-day interactions and lives we live? Before the year had started, I talked with my friends, saw who was going to take the confirmation class, and decided that I was going to do it. Although I didn't really know what I was getting myself into at first. For me, I never really felt like who I knew who I was talking to during prayers and why we pray to a God. Through this course, sitting with Rabbi Serkman each Tuesday for an hour gave me a new understanding of Judaism as a whole and where God is within our everyday lives. Since Moses Mendelssohn claimed that there is no difficulty in being modern with religious faith, I began to understand how you could take religion and integrate it into your own modern sense of the world. Additionally, he advocated that there should be a balance of faith and reason within our lives, showing the necessity for a balanced approach to how Judaism guides our lives. Moving more specifically into my new understanding of God, I began to understand that God is in the places in which we are present and truly aware. Through Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism makes this clear. It is really Martin Buber who speaks to me to the heart for what God is all about. Writing I and Thou, Buber teaches us about the relationships in our lives, basically dividing human interaction into I-it and I-thou. For me, these I-thou relationships help to let God into our lives because, to me, relationships are a very important part of my life. As Buber understood, the relation with man is the real simile of our relation with God. When I'm with my group of friends or with the baseball team, the bonds we share, whether we're having dinners or on the field playing the game, is like no other. There's just such camaraderie and trust that we share, which is crucial, and it's crucial that we all have this connection. It is an unspoken trust which makes our being as a group possible. Without these ties between everyone in the group, the team would fall apart, or we would lose every game. This shows me that the most important place we find God is within our relationships, as the teaching of Buber help us understand. Through this confirmation year, I was able to have my view of religion wholly changed, and the idea of a God changed as well. For as we grow and change, God grows with us, which is why I realize today that when we are with people who we have strong relationships with and are indeed present and aware, God is somehow there. These moments are the times we should cherish most and never take for granted.
I'm playing the part of Evie Scherslep, who's a little under the weather. Evie's family's not here, are they? Just want to make sure. Throughout this past year, I have learned about a number of Jewish philosophers, each of whom have spent their lives trying to decipher the puzzle that is God's identity. They each wrestle with the question of how people should welcome God into their lives, and by now, I've come to my own conclusion. I believe that God is not a being, rather, God is the deep connection in our lives. Someone who believes in God is one who recognizes and appreciates their deepest relationships. Back in September, on the first night, Rabbi Serkman asked us, what comes to mind when we hear the word God? I immediately thought of a big man with a white beard sitting on a cloud. Obviously, this was false, but I didn't consider the possibility of God not being a mystical spirit. One night, more recently, we learned about the 20th century Jewish philosopher Martin Buber. Buber explains that all people can sort their relationships into two categories, I-it relationships and I-thou relationship. An I-it relationship is one with little emotional connection. These are experienced when you run into an old friend while walking your dog or when you see a distant family friend. They are surface level or cordial, nothing too deep. An I-thou relationship is much deeper. It is your connection with your mom, sister, brother, dad, best friend, anyone who you would sacrifice something important for. It is a relationship that is mutual and one where each person puts the other person's happiness over their own. Buber believes that it is within the context of how everyday life is lived that God is truly revealed. Every day when you wake up and say hi to your family or are truly there for someone you love, you are experiencing God. God is making your life meaningful by bringing you together with the people who mean the most to you. Many people in need of God resort to searching for him, looking in all the far-off, presumably holy places. Buber explains that this is not a good way to go about it. Essentially, Buber's explaining that God is not separated from us. God is in us and between us. I believe that no one needs to try to welcome God into their lives. God is already in our lives. We experience God every time we make a connection, smile at a friend, laugh with your family, or enjoy the presence of an authentic relationship. After all, truly meaningful connections with others are what makes life so special. You don't welcome God into your life when you decide to believe in him or her. You welcome God into your life when you recognize and appreciate your deepest relationships. We rise.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, בעלמא תברך חירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בגלה ובזמן קריב ויאמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך, לעלם ולעלמי עלמיה, יתברך, יתברך וישתבח, ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל, שמי דקודשה בריחו, לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דהמירן בעלמה, ויאמרו night, night, night.
I live a self-contradictory life. If asked, I'll say I do not believe in God, yet I say thank God on a daily basis. My teacher doesn't call on me when I'm totally zoned out. Thank God. I almost trip in the middle of a crowded hallway at school. Thank God. I almost leave without closing the door, but remember at the last second. Thank God. God follows me through all of my near misses, so why don't I believe in God? It's hard for me, someone that believes in science and numbers, to put faith in something I can't see or touch. Something I've absolutely no proof in except for what I feel inside. Yet I also believe that everything happens for a reason, and there's someone or something with a plan for me. And with every challenge I face, it is bringing me closer to my goals. One could argue that when something bad happens to me and I get through it by believing that it has happened for a reason, that God is there, and honestly, they wouldn't be entirely wrong. However, if I accepted that as a truth, I would also be accepting a belief in God, and in all honesty, I don't want to. When something horrible happens to me, my loved ones, or in the world, I do not want to accept that there is a God allowing that to happen. For me, God cannot be a controlling power beyond us, but a power within us. When we say we believe in God, we are actually saying we believe in our best selves to make the right choices in life, to bring about the best, most hopeful results. Erich Fromm, early 20th century German Jewish psychiatrist, understood God as the most desirable good for any person. Fromm thought that God was not a being far beyond, but an ideal that we as humans could strive for to make our lives and our world better. When I say thank God, it is just because it is easier for me to be grateful to someone instead of just being grateful. When Fromm says God is the image of man's higher self, a symbol of what we ought to become, he is reminding us that God is not a person or a thing out in the world, but a version of us. God is not someone that is above us and does not deserve to be put on a pedestal and admired. Instead of praising a God that rules over us, we should be praising the God within us. What I mean by that is that we should be praising our best selves and striving to become it.
Everyone lives a personal life, disconnected from other humans. I strive to be happy with who I am, and the thoughts inside my head are mine and mine only. Though many struggle with self-acceptance, the self is the easiest thing for humans to understand and to let in. Everyone lives a social life, connected with those who they love and those who love them. I love my family and friends dearly, and the emotions and memories that connect us are shared between us and us alone. Though many struggle with accepting other people, it is natural for humans to try and understand each other and let each other in. Everyone lives a spiritual life, connected to some higher power, some God. The mysteries of the universe that God has power over permeate all aspects of living. But before confirmation, I struggled with letting God in. I let in other humans because I have empathy for them. I can aspire to understand what is going on in their head, and I can dip my toe into their personal life and come out a better person. I cannot do that with God, and therefore I could not connect with God. As we progressed through this past year's exploration, I got worried that no Jewish thinkers would struggle with the same things I did. As we entered the 20th century, Jewish thinkers started to radically change. Major Jewish theologians stopped looking up to God and started to look around them. Some Jews surmised that God created humans in God's image, so it was natural to look at humans as if looking into a mirror of what God is. Then we came to Erich Fromm, whose ideas of God were unlike any ideas I've heard before. His thinking not only answered my question, but it prompted new questions with its answer. Erich Fromm was a German Jewish thinker and psychologist who lived from 1900 to 1980. He was a humanist and the epitome of a humanist Jew. He believed that God was not in fact a being above humans, but instead believed that God was simply the culmination of all the good of humanity, or what he called the most desirable good. I agree with Fromm, sort of. I too am a humanist. So Fromm guided my search for God away from the heavens and into my personal and social lives. Where I don't agree with Fromm is his ideas of good and bad. He believed in a strong sense of good and bad, with God being on the side of good. I don't believe the world has a good and bad. Every circumstance has myriad perspectives, each one different from the last. These perspectives culminate in a jumbled story, not a binary outcome. While I may be able to define good and bad from my perspective of the world, Fromm's God encapsulates all perspectives of the world. Though Fromm pointed me in a new direction, I still struggled. It wasn't until recently that I sat down and truly ruminated on my beliefs, with a genuine yearning to come to some conclusions. I looked at the curriculum of confirmation as a whole, not confining myself to the select few theologians who resonated with me. Rambam would approve of my analytical approach to the problem. My God is not above humanity. My God is not some abstract goal of humanity. My God is not good or bad. It hit me. For my entire life, I have observed invisible connections with other people, invisible forces that connect every human and drive every human to help every other human. That is where I found God, in this collective mind of humanity. While Fromm views this collective mind as good, I prefer to describe it as connection. It was the mind of humanity that sent humans into space. It is the mind of humanity that carries an elderly lady's groceries across the street. And it was the mind of humanity that built the amazing community of Larchmont Temple. There is no reason why there can't be a physical consciousness formed when people work together, a consciousness greater than the sum of its parts. I now understand God in the same way I understand human connection. To let God in, we do not need to look up in awe. All we have to do is look around us and be part of the mind that brings connection.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto, Leolam Vaed.
Before going into this year, I was very skeptical about God's presence in my life. Occasionally, the night before a baseball game or seconds before a big test, I would close my eyes and pray to God. To be honest, I had no idea what praying to God was or how it would help me, but I still did it. I don't really know what God is, which leads me to the question if there could be any logical way to explain God's presence, but I could never find an answer. After exploring many God thinkers this year in confirmation, trying to find an answer to my question, I looked to Rabbi Mordecai Kaplan, the founder of Reconstructionalist Judaism. He says that God is not a person, but rather a power of the process. After hearing this and other perspectives he shares about how God is not a supernatural being and someone greater than we are, or a power beyond us, I felt a change in my relationship with God. Kaplan has helped me see God as a background character, maybe the background character. Think of a picture with the center of focus on me, but in the back is an unfocused, blurry figure, which in my case, is God. If I trust that God is there, but not going to fix my problems, I can trust the process and go with the flow in life. And though this God may not be speaking to me, he or she is supporting me to be my best self. When I was in 8th grade, I played for a travel baseball team in the summer, which was very intense. I wasn't that good at the sport back then, but I loved to play the game. The only problem was that I always got very nervous before each game. But this one game was different. It was the first round of playoffs, and we were playing our rival, the White Plains Hin Run. And I was told that I was going to be the starting pitcher. I never really started as a pitcher, and for that reason, I was extra nervous. Right before falling asleep, I decided to pray to God. I prayed asking God to let me do well this game and let our team win. I always saw people praying to God and decided to give it a shot, hoping it would enhance my playing ability for the next game. Finally, the day came to play. I couldn't eat my breakfast. The nerves were coursing through my body, still there when I got to the field. But we ended up losing that game and I pitched an awful game. What I thought back then was that God failed me, but truthfully, I failed myself. Kaplan helped me see that God is not some superpower who will do it for us. God is the natural ability we have to believe in ourselves to do our best. God did not lose that game, we did. But God can help me grow from that experience and become a better pitcher, and more importantly, a better person. ואהבת את אדוני אליך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבניך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ושוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאור על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, ובטחתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
When we were told to share thoughts about God, that got me thinking and asking a lot of questions. Who is God? What is God? Is God real? Sorry. When we were told to share thoughts about God, that got me thinking and asking a lot of questions. Who is God? What is God? Is God real? Everyone in our class offered different answers to this question. We see on the news every day bad and upsetting things happen, and I wonder to myself why God isn't helping. Does God control the way of life, or does God control the way life works so bad things don't happen? I believe that unlucky or unfortunate things happen to people, and that's just part of life. So how does God play a part in all of this? I wish God did help the innocent people that suffer and prevent them from suffering in the first place, but from past events, it does not seem like life works that way. Elie Wiesel, a Holocaust survivor and Nobel Prize-winning author and teacher, survived a time where God seemed to be absent. What was Wiesel's response to the suffering all around him? As he writes, "And so I persevered." This quote may seem short, but it brings a deeper meaning. In the toughest times of our lives, God may be absent. Wiesel experienced one of the most hateful and demoralizing things ever in the history of our world, but he persevered through it. In a time where God seemed to be absent, he found the spirit inside to get through it. He lived to tell his story and educate others of his past. When Rabbi Serkman told us the stories about Wiesel, I was moved and realized Wiesel lived for a purpose, to remind us how we respond. When times get tough, it is up to us. Perseverance is something I try to live with every day. When God's presence feels like it is absent, persevere. Find the strength to get through those tough times, so you can look back and celebrate the good times that will hopefully come. The bad things that happen teach us life isn't perfect, but we cannot hold God responsible. It is up to us to respond. If we can face life's difficulties and persevere, we can make life as good as it can be. Maybe that is where God's presence can be found.
מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש, מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש. נורא עושה פלא, נורא עושה פלא, משה ומרים, זה אלינו ויאמרו, זה אלינו ויאמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. מי כמוך באלים, אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש, מי כמוך באלים, אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש. נורא תהילות, אוסף אליו, נורא תהילות, אוסף אליו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד.
Conflict between Ukraine and Russia, hearing the hoary stories and so many innocent people suffering makes you think about how we find God in times like these, when violence and hate seems to make people's lives so hard. With so many awful things happening, is God even there? In the most difficult moments, and we as Jewish people have had so many over the centuries, when we were rounded up and sent to concentration camps, where was God? Elie Wiesel talks about what we must do in the face of suffering to make God present. As he writes, whoever goes through a trial or takes part in a difficult moment that weighs on man's destiny is duty bound to transmit what he has seen, felt, and feared. To Wiesel, this means bearing witness to Jewish memory, telling the story of human suffering, not to understand it, but in order to make sure it does not happen again. When you bear witness to the memory of tragedy, even if you aren't looking for God, you're helping people cope by supporting those who suffer and helping them know they are not alone. In a way, connecting people, that makes God present. The best way to find God in the midst of life's difficulties is to keep their stories alive by bearing witness, helping people find hope and joining together to work for the promise of a better world. Hashkiveinu Adonai, Eloheinu l'shalom, v'hamidenu shomreinu l'chaim. Spread the shelter of your peace over us. Guide us in wisdom, compassion, and trust. Hashkiveinu Adonai, Eloheinu l'shalom, v'hamidenu shomreinu l'chaim. Save us for the sake of your name. Shield us from hatred, sorrow, and pain. Hashkiveinu Adonai, Eloheinu l'shalom, v'hamidenu shomreinu l'chaim.
During the confirmation process, I've gained a better understanding of what it means to be a Jew. With the help of Rabbi Serkman, I've been able to search and learn the ideologies of several great Jewish thinkers. The one Jewish teacher that resonated most with me was Elie Wiesel. I've read Elie Wiesel's book, Night, twice, and it is the single most powerful piece of literature that I've ever read. At the beginning of Night, I remember Wiesel saying that he was a very devout Jew who studied Torah vigorously. As the book progressed and the Holocaust continued, Wiesel said that he lost his faith in God and became cynical. With everything happening to him, one couldn't blame him for his doubts. How could God allow millions of innocent people to be slaughtered without consequence? Wiesel ended up challenging his views towards God. Rather than pretending to understand how God worked, he focused on what he must do. For Wiesel, God is bearing witness to memory with Jewish living. Wiesel has referred to being Jewish as a mirror. Your beliefs are a reflection of where you are in the world, who you are, and how you remember. Trying to figure out what you believe and find your religious identity can be confusing, but Wiesel has helped me see the mirror. Being Jewish is a direct reflection of who you are. I believe that no two people will envision God in the same exact way, and that is because it must be a reflection of you, your hopes, and questions. You must constantly ask questions about life in order to gain better understanding of what it means to be who you are. I've constantly wondered about God's action or inaction throughout history. I now know that to be born a Jew is to realize we are here to bear witness, in a way, to be God's eyes and heart, to stand against hate and stand for hope. That is what defines being Jewish.
We would normally now, Abby, come on up. We would normally now pray the Avot, the Gevurot, and the Kedusha prayers. The Avot is about our forefathers and foremothers. Notice there'll be a new twist. The Gevurot is about God's actions and how we mirror those actions. Notice there'll be a new twist. And the Kedusha is about holiness and how we find holiness in the awe with which we face the world. Just wait.
Before I came to confirmation, I thought God could only be interpreted one way, as a higher being who created the world and is basically the head of everything. However, I now know that God can be something different for everyone. Some thinkers see God in our relationships with others. Some see God as the mind of the universe, etc. Through confirmation, comments that really caught my attention were said by inspiring female Jewish thinkers such as Marcia Falk and Judith Plaskow. They are not saying that God is a woman. Rather, they are taking away God's masculinity and looking at God through a female lens. On the first day of confirmation, Rabbi Serkman asked us what the most important Jewish symbol is. We all guessed symbols such as the Star of David, Torah, and Menorah. The rabbi then revealed that the most important Jewish symbol was the question mark, because as Jews, we are always questioning stuff. A major question I have about God is God's gender. In most prayers and stories, God is called He. While I cannot agree or disagree with this statement, it was interesting to hear about God through the lens of another gender. Marcia Falk believes that the blessing, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, is hierarchical, presuming that God is male. I agree with this because for most all of human existence, men have been associated with being the boss, somehow in charge of the way things work in society. By assigning God a male pronoun, we are feeding into the stereotypes that men are superior. Marcia Falk changes the blessing to, let us bless this source, wellspring of life. By looking at our prayer through a feminist lens, prayer is now more inclusive, welcoming, and doesn't make anyone feel inferior. What Jewish feminism teaches us is that we must see beyond gender. By taking away the status and gender of God, we open up new space for ways to identify God, ways that bring us even closer to our true selves and to one another. Let us bless the wellspring of life through Abraham and Sarah.
Hello, everyone. Okay. Over the previous months, my classmates and I have studied a multitude of Jewish thinkers, all with different theories pertaining to God. Many have caused inner reflection within me regarding my own thoughts on our religion and our God, yet none quite to the effect of Rambam. Rambam, Moses Maimonides, the 12th century thinker, believed the key to connection with God was through our intellects. Is it only through education and academic discovery that we can truly embrace our God? Well, Rambam conceived an incomplete theory for this. Like the Bible, Rambam believed in the presence of angels in our world. These angels were direct extensions of God, yet Rambam believed them not to take any form. Instead, they were purely intellectual beings. They were sent to our earth and governed the people that populated it. At first glance of reading over Rambam's text, I couldn't pinpoint the exact meaning of this idea, although when it came to me, it inspired me. Angels do not take form, yet they govern. Angels manifest through intellect, for they are intellectual beings. When an American or any other nationality, when a Caucasian or an Asian, when a Jew or a Catholic, when just a human reads a book, they are angels. In other words, when a human programs a line of code, when a human performs a successful surgery, when a human passes their math test, or when a human delivers a beautiful speech, these humans are all in essence angels. Why are they angels? For the angel is the closest being to God, and through a person using their intellects, they find themselves in a closer proximity to Adonai. All ethnicities and religions prioritize education, although I have finally come to understand why it is so crucial in the development of a young Jew, that through learning and hoping to use our education for the greater good in the future, we too will become angels and find ourselves in close proximity to Adonai. Thank you.
This year's confirmation class has affected me and showed me ways to let God in. When confirmation first started, honestly, I had no idea what to expect. The very first thing the rabbi asked us was, how do you picture God and what comes to mind? I knew my answer right away. Ever since I was little, for some reason, to me, God looked like the man on the front of the children's book, Caps for Sale. Maybe it's because he's sitting on a tree looking down over the land, but I knew that this was no ordinary answer. And it didn't come as a surprise when many of my peers said they pictured an old man with a long beard in the sky. This was when I knew I had a special relationship with God. Whenever I go to services for a bar mitzvah, the high holidays, or the occasional Shabbat, there's always a moment of silent prayer. To me, the word prayer has always meant looking for guidance for yourself or for others. I always thought that there were more people with bigger problems than my own who needed God's help, so instead of asking for God's guidance, we would have a chill conversation. I didn't ask for anything or pray for guidance, but rather talk to God almost as if he were a friend. I even ended each conversation with something like, all right, nice catching up, talk soon. Martin Buber helped me find times where I can have my chill conversations with God and not just during the silent prayer at temple. Buber understands that we find God through our deepest relationships and connections in the world, what he calls I-thou. The I-thou relation is being totally present in life, believing that God is with you during a time of simple yet serene bliss. It's when you take the little things in life that bring you joy and think to yourself, oh, God definitely had my back for this one. One time, after we were playing with model magic clay in the dark, we sat in a circle and shared times where we had an I-thou moment with another person and through them with God. I remember Rabbi Serkman described when he and his wife would go to the diner on the weekends and sit there for hours just talking and enjoying each other. This led me to realize my I-thou moment is when I can take a step outside my own body and look at my connection with the world and myself with happiness. I thought of the time when I was in the Hamptons right at the end of the summer and I was all alone in the ocean just before the sun went down. The waves were big, but they weren't scary. I stood there looking out at the horizon, and I just knew this would be one of my happiest moments. It was so simple and so beautiful. Looking back, it was a moment of deep connection, and I see that God was with me. As I move forward in the world, I want to take notice of the times where I have an I thou moment. There will be millions of more examples as I grow up than just me being in the ocean, and I want to cherish each of them. Baruch atah Adonai ha'el hakadosh. Blessed are you, Adonai, our holy God.
As a Reformed Jew, even with a family deeply involved with the temple, I often do not feel that God is present in my daily life. When I'm playing with my friends, doing my homework, going about my daily routine, I often don't think about a divine being present. I think I speak for everyone when I say that oftentimes it can be extremely difficult to see where God is in our daily lives, especially when we are busy with routine tasks and actions. But luckily, I think I might have found an answer. What if God was not in any material place at all, and yet could be found in those extraordinary moments and relationships? Martin Buber, a 20th century Jewish existentialist, created exactly this idea of finding God in the special moments of true and authentic relationship. As he says, it's all about the encounter, how human beings relate. To connect to another person, a family member, a friend, or even a total stranger, and share in an honest and open-hearted conversation or action is how we can work to feel God's presence in our daily lives. Buber calls this an I-thou moment, and when you think about it, they are everywhere. Around the fourth or so confirmation session, sitting in the darkness of the sanctuary next to the other confirmands, I too was asked to think of a moment where I felt God was present. Countless memories of being with family, friends, and companions flooded me with warm feelings, but one in particular stood out. I remembered the second to last day of sleepaway camp, when me and my camp friends went down to the water and just sat, talking for a solid hour, knowing that a good handful of us would probably never see each other again. I know it sounds cheesy, but it was one of those moments where the conversation was genuine, and through just that, we made a memory that would last forever. It was a true I-thou experience, and guess what? God was there. So, how can you discover God on a daily basis? By actively trying to have meaningful interaction and relationships with others. As Buber teaches, all real living is meeting. In connecting with the people in our lives who truly matter, we can establish a closer relationship to God. And I promise that if you look back on some of the best memories you have, you will realize that God was there all along.
Kedushat Hayom. Eloheinu ve'Elohei avoteinu ve'imotenu ya'aleh ve'yavo ve'yizacher zichroneinu ve'zichron kol amcha Beit Yisrael lefanecha letova ולחן ולחסד ולרחמים ולחיים ולשלום ביום חג השבועות הזה. זוכרנו אדוני אלוהינו בו לטובה ופוקדנו בו לברכה והושיענו בו לחיים. Our God and God of our ancestors, be mindful of your people Israel and recall our merit for good and grace, and in loving kindness and compassion for life and peace on this festival of Shavuot. This day remember us for well-being. Amen. This day remember us with your nearness. Amen. This day help us to a fuller life.
Across the world, a brutal war is raging on, with casualties just constantly piling up. Everywhere we go, we cannot seem to escape a pandemic which has haunted us for the past 2 years. There are supply chain issues and global food and water shortages, a climate crisis and talks of an economic recession and humanitarian crisis all throughout the world. There is no doubt that on a daily basis, all of us confront some amount of evil and conflict in our lives. But the question is not whether we will face evil and crisis in our world, but rather where we can find God when we do. That is the question I asked myself, and I looked to Jewish philosophers Martin Buber and Elie Wiesel to find my answer. Buber and Wiesel teach us that in the face of evil, we must stand up for what's right, help those in need, be optimistic, and always bear witness and remember. When facing these crises, Buber tried to avoid using force to fight back for what was right, However, he understood the limits of pacifism in trying to find God and fight back against evil. He understood that sometimes violence would be needed to fight back against this evil. However, he always used it as a last resort. Buber did not believe that it was human nature to be evil, and he viewed evil in two stages. One of them is being passive, and the other is the intention to do evil actions onto others. He also believed in something called the radical evil. This is every once in a while where God would leave humanity on its own for a period of time, and he said this happened during the Holocaust. I agree with Buber in multiple aspects. Although the belief that evil will be inevitable may be viewed as pessimistic, I see it as more realistic, at least for now in 2022. We can see evil daily with our own eyes, albeit usually on a small scale. However, it is also happening on a much larger scale at the global level, and it is up to us to act. I believe in the radical evil that Buber talks about. However, I do not believe that we are currently in a time where God has left us. God is still with us, and as long as that is true, then there will always be hope. But it is up to us to not be bystanders. We must actively take part in the fight against evil, as only then we will be able to defeat it. I agree that our first option should not be violence when fighting it back against this evil, but it is critical that we are ready to fight for all that is good in this world and push back against evil. Meanwhile, Wiesel's focus was on the importance of bearing witness. When a terrible event happens, it is critical that all of us pay attention and remember what happens. We must not forget because we are guaranteeing that the past repeats itself when we do. I see eye to eye with Wiesel on his beliefs about bearing witness. It is necessary that in the face of evil, we remember what we see. When we forget history, we are doomed to repeat it. I believe that humanity should constantly be trying to make itself better and move away from evil, but this can only be done when we bear witness and remember our past and our stories. Today, we constantly face crisis. However, we must never give up hope and stop looking for God in the middle of all of this chaos. Because the day we stop looking for God is the day that the chance of our victory becomes impossible. We have to believe that things will get better, and we must actively attempt to make them better. When we fight back against evil, stand up for what's right, and remember what happened by bearing witness, only then will we one day achieve a happy, peaceful, and sustainable future.
Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Ki atahu melech adon lechol hashalom. Ki atahu melech adon lechol hashalom. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. V'tov be'einecha levarech et Amcha Yisrael bechol עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Tasim Leolam. Tasim Leolam.
So, when I was younger, maybe 12 or 13, my sister was telling me about confirmation. She really wanted me to do it, but I wasn't so sure. My response to her was something along the lines of, yeah, but I don't believe in God, so what's the point? Her response was, well, we go over that in confirmation. That's something Rabbi Serkman talks about. I asked her, do you believe in God? She paused for a second, pondering the question. Then, after a few seconds, finally responded, I see God as the inherent goodness of humanity. That has stuck with me ever since, and over the past few months, my idea of God has changed. I no longer imagine God as the standard idea that everyone before me has talked about, the man in the sky with the beard and whatever. I don't have a single image of God anymore. I have come to the conclusion that God is different to everyone, which I know, wow, completely original. In fact, if anything, tonight has already shown that there are more different interpretations of God than I could have ever imagined. But my idea is a little bit more complex than that. I believe that God is, well, subjective, based on each individual's perspective of the world. I believe that God is what each individual needs and gains comfort and order from. For example, my God is a single statement. The universe couldn't give less of a shit about me, so I'm gonna make it. It's pure hubris, it's unrealistic, and hell, I don't even fully know what it means. But my response to a dispassionate universe is to find my own way of creating meaning. And if you call that God, so be it.
Hopefully they can stand as soon as you start singing. We'll see.
Ein kamocha va'Elohim Adonai, ve'ein kema'asecha, malchutecha malchut kol olamim, u'memshaltecha bechol dor v'dor. Adonai melech, Adonai malach, Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed. Adonai oz le'amo yitein, Adonai yevarech et amo v'shalom. Av harachamim, Heitiva virsonecha et Zion, Tivne chomot Yerushalayim, Tivne chomot Yerushalayim. Kivecha levad batachnu, melech eram benisa, Adon olamim.
Ki mitzion tetzeh Torah, dvar Adonai Yerushalayim. For out of Zion shall go forth Torah, the word of Adonai, from Jerusalem.
I've always liked to tell fictional stories, stories that come from the free land of my imagination. This land of freedom is really just a twisting of the fabrication of reality. It is a pulling together of my understanding and interpretation of the world into a nice, pleasant bundle. Embedded in all the fictionality that a story can contain are truths and valuable lessons. Because a story relates to the experience of all humans on Earth and contains lessons that we can all learn from, they span all the differences that exist amongst us. Stories are universal. They unite us. Stories have the power to bridge these vast seas of difference. Their truths can be applied to any circumstance or situation faced by any human on this planet. These timeless and placeless miracles are at the foundation of the connection that people have with one another on Earth. They are timeless and indescribable. A mother and a son, a friend and a friend, the old teaching to the young. All of these relationships are built on stories from generation to generation. Jewish philosopher Martin Buber conveyed the power of the story in his masterpiece, Tales of the Hasidism. Jewish stories were tiny miracles which contained the essence of life. As Rabbi Moshe of Kobrin taught, in the town where I grew up, in the town square, was a man who told stories. I would go and listen every day. He told what he knew, I heard what I needed. By sharing your stories, you will learn the values, messages, and truths of humankind to spread to future generations. As Buber stated, what is the difference between a person who buys himself a fur coat and a person who buys himself kindling in winter? The first wants to keep only themselves warm, the second wants to give warmth to others too. Without stories, our world will be cold. We need stories in order to fuel our existence. Without stories, our world would, of course, exist, but statically. There'll be trees, there'll be people, there'll be information, there'll be buildings, there'll be objects. But it would not be truly alive. There wouldn't be the magical thing that connects me to you and us to our world. Maybe Elie Wiesel was right. God created us because he so loves stories.
Arohi Adonai Eloha. Oh, my fault. Praise the one to whom praise is due. Praise be the one whom praise is due, now and forever. Praised be our eternal God, ruler of the universe, who has chosen us from all peoples to give us the Torah. We praise you, eternal one, giver of the Torah. Lord, am your God, who led you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Anohi Adonai Eloha, asher hotzeiticha, me eretz Mitzrayim, mi bait avadim. On one of the first days of confirmation, we were asked to draw a picture of what we thought God was. Our pictures were somewhat different from one another, but relatively similar in terms of being an old dude in the clouds with a staff. Some people drew fog, and some people drew nothing, but the lesson was clear. Defining God is arbitrary and doesn't make sense. To assign a random image or body to an all-powerful figure won't help us understand God any better because there are not any true images. We are told in the Torah that God is beyond image, and that trying to depict God through a portrait and a picture is in fact a violation of the Ten Commandments. So how can we come to understand God, a God who can't even be pictured? This wasn't until a later date when we studied Rambam, 12th century Jewish philosopher Moses Maimonides, that became clear to me that we cannot define God by what he is, or he or she is. In this lesson, we discussed the idea of defining God with exclusive statements rather than inclusive ones. Rambam calls this negative attribution. He understood that we can never really say what God is, but we can say what God is not. God is unknown, so any trait you assign to God cannot be true, or at least known to be true in the human sense of knowing. I thought this was so interesting because it made so much sense, and yet I had never heard anything like it. It was such a new idea. While the other thinkers philosophized and pondered in trying to create new ways, new good definitions for understanding what God is, Rambam helped us understand we can never really know. As a person who loves to read cartoons, the idea that there is a being beyond all pictures we can draw spoke to me. The image of an imageless God meant that there is a power beyond everything even the greatest artist or philosopher can picture or imagine, and yet a reflection of that God lives in all of us.
12th century Jewish philosopher Moses Maimonides, better known by his nickname Rambam, believed that what links us to God is our intellect and how we use it. He understood that God was the mind of the universe and that our ability to learn how the world works somehow connects us to God. So, if a possible pathway to God is through wisdom, gaining a PhD, how did this apply to our current high school life? I try to remain an optimist as much as possible. A time where this is especially hard is when it comes to school, something that consumes the majority of my life, along with all of my peers. I find myself surrounded by, believing, and even saying some of these negative statements like, if I wanted to do this with my life, why can't I just use Google to find the answer? Pursuing and attaining great wisdom can be a burden. School is often overwhelming and hard. Growing up, I've watched my dad push himself to earn a PhD while balancing life and work, peering over his shoulder to see him attend Zoom classes before it was even a thing. This caused me some confusion, as I've always had a respect for motivation, but the education system, we all know, seems to never end. To try and bring more meaning to this educational journey that has been fed to me nonstop throughout the course of my childhood, most specifically now in high school, I will apply Rambam's belief that a pathway to God is through wisdom and gaining the greatest knowledge we can, let's say a PhD. Is something as common as attending and learning classes in high school bringing us closer to God? Rambam strips learning of creativity and imagination, which is where I tend to lean, as he teaches the world can be explained in a logical manner, and that the human mind is one of the most important avenues for knowing and approaching God. It seems that Rambam believes that by looking at God as the highest expression of our intellectual abilities, life gets a whole lot clearer. I agree, but only if you add to the learning process human creativity. Life is filled with struggles, big questions we all ask. The best way to persevere along life's path is to use our minds to try to understand our world. And even though, as Rambam teaches, we will never actually find all the answers, by stimulating our brain in such a way we can uncover countless new perspectives. I will continue to learn and be creative in my approach, because the more knowledge of the world we possess, the closer we come to answering the questions about life that ultimately leads us to God. Lo tatma be re'echa, lo tatma eshet re'echa, vavdo v'mato v'ashiro, v'chamaro v'kol asher l're'echa.
וזאת התורה שעשה משה לפני בני ישראל על פי אדוני ביד משה. יאללה לי 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 לי, יאללה לי 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 לי, יאללה לי 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 לי. חיים היא למחזיקים בה בתומכיה מאושר דרכיה דרכי נועם וכל נתיבותיה שלום. השיבנו אדוני אליך ונשובה. חדש חדש ימינו, חדש ימינו כקדם. It's all right. We're about to hear Leah Brody. This is not her. She's about to come on.
You see, when you do a lot of God stuff, strange things happen.
When sitting down to write this sign statement, I was faced with a difficult issue. This happens to be one I faced throughout confirmation, but has become more prevalent in recent days. How do I write about God when I don't entirely believe in the concept of a God? The obvious choice here could have been to lie, make something up, and go about my life. Despite that easier way out, I challenged myself instead to delve into what makes a God and how I can believe in my own way. In this research, I noticed that philosopher Martin Buber had a very interesting theory. God isn't some big man in the sky, but rather the special moments we share between one another, or as he puts it, spirit is not in the I, but rather between the I and thou. This resonated with me in a way nothing had before, particularly when it comes to religion. As someone who has been lucky enough to share these aforementioned special moments, I was able to imagine the truth to Buber's statements. A particular example came to mind for me. Every day, from the age of about 11 to just this past year at age 15, I would FaceTime my grandma every single day. We would sit for hours talking about everything, nothing, and whatever was left in between. While seemingly mundane, especially daily, I never knew the value of it until it was gone. Looking back, there definitely was something in those experiences that could be akin to God. I truly appreciated this message for another reason as well. God is found between at least two people. The thinking that one person must be closer to God than another never sat quite right with me. And by thinking that God must be with multiples, it was oddly comforting. God is in no one person's possession, but, as Buber suggests, in the space between two who relate to one another authentically, from the heart. Confirmation has been a challenging, enlightening, and genuinely fun adventure for me to go on. I not only feel like a more intellectual version of myself, but one more grounded in my roots and my religion. I thank Rabbi Serkman for opening our eyes to a myriad of ideas, opposing standpoints, and a diverse collection of opinions, as well as for guiding us on this journey.
The idea of religion is centered around an idea of a great human destiny. The idea that we as a people have been granted a purpose by a higher power, and that there is something that we must achieve. The issue is that we are not entirely sure what is asked of us, and what we must do to accomplish it. When are we fulfilling our purpose? How, through realizing that purpose, are we letting God in? This question becomes even more difficult to answer when taking into account the fact that people disagree on what the nature of God is, how is it that God exists, if even at all, and what its role is in our lives, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The truth is, there are no answers to these questions, and there never will be. All we can do is speculate as to what put us here and for what reason. Judaism is a never-ending series of questions with no answers, and even though we know our efforts to be futile, we cannot help but ask. But perhaps we are attempting to understand the incomprehensible. Perhaps the question of God is one that the human mind is not meant to comprehend. Rabbi Abraham Heschel believed so. He was a proponent of the idea called radical amazement, or the idea that we cannot comprehend God and shouldn't try to, that God exists everywhere where we can possibly perceive what he calls the sublime. This sense comes in the form of what can only be described as amazement at the very fact of reality itself. He believed that while we do not comprehend the existence of God, this ability to perceive or apprehend the sublime is intuition of a divine presence. Why does this matter? Well, Heschel says that this perception of the ineffable comes along with a sense that something is being asked of us. So what exactly is it we are being asked to do? Heschel believes that God is in search of man, that we are something God needs for the manifestation of his will on earth. That we are the only creatures capable of this, as we are the only ones capable of hearing this call of God. In aiding a creature, he is helping the Creator. In succoring the poor, he fulfills a concern of God. In admiring the good, he reveres the Spirit of God. In loving the pure, he is drawn to him. In promoting the right, he is directing things towards God's will, in which all aims must terminate. Heschel argues that to exist is to be demanded to do good deeds. We sense this call from the divine, and we have an obligation to respond. This isn't about what the importance of God is in our lives, but rather it is about the importance of our lives to God. Now, I'm not sure if I necessarily agree with Heschel's assessment here, as how can we understand the aims of something we cannot understand? I feel as if Heschel comes to conclusion in areas where perhaps we shouldn't have. But this still leaves us with infinite questions. What is the will of God? That is impossible to say, but we can say that we are likely here to fulfill it. Most of what Heschel preaches is really just speculation that leaves us with far more questions than answers, yet that is by design. Religion is not about answers, it's about our questions. Questions that have no answers, but ones that still demand to be asked. I've always found myself frustrated with religion. I had this idea of what this God was meant to be in my head, an idea that quickly led me to believe that God either didn't care about humanity or didn't exist. I used this idea of a higher power as an answer to reality, not as the question daily posed to reality. I was applying my own idea of what God should be onto my own perception of reality. But now I understand that we cannot confine God to ideas that humanity can comprehend. While we may have grievances with the world, we may question where God is in any of this, we may understand that while God's will may be far beyond us, the answer somehow still lies within us.
We rise for Arlena. We're in the bottom of page 22.
Aleinu l'shabeach la'adon hakol, la'teit gedula liyotzeh bereshit, shelo asanu kegoyei ha'aratzot, velo samanu kemishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkeinu kahem, v'goreleinu kechol hamonam, va'anachnu korihim, ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד Ushemo echad.
About a year ago, my grandma was diagnosed with breast cancer. This was devastating to me. I had never gotten to meet my other grandma because she sadly passed from breast cancer before I was born. Every year, my family flies out to California to visit my grandparents, and it's some of the most fun I have all year. Swimming in the pool, playing basketball, playing tennis. It's always so great whenever I'm up there. My grandma, although she can be crazy sometimes, is one of the nicest people I know. This is why I just didn't understand how God could give how God could just give a perfect, wonderful person such a terrible sickness. If God was in charge, he was doing a really terrible job. For a while, I hated God, resented God. I was angry at God. Until I started confirmation and learned about the many different Jewish approaches to how God could be understood, especially Martin Buber. Buber taught me that we find God in our most special relationships. Buber helped me see that when you really care about someone and they care about you, and you love being with each other in those special times when you are together, you share what he called I-thou moments, which means I can truly find God in the moments I have with my grandma. That every time I am with her, God is there too. I now understand that although there is nothing I can do to help my grandma's sickness, because maybe God is not in charge of things like sickness and war, by FaceTiming her and texting her and spending time with her, I not only connect with my grandma, I find God as well.
We rise together as a congregation, remembering those who are not here any longer, but whose love, like Cam's grandma, lives. And so we close our eyes for a minute. Maybe we recall a Torah teacher, especially on this Shavuot, somebody who taught us life lessons by which we still try to conduct our lives, somebody whose love lives in us whenever we see their face, remember their voice, taste their recipe, feel their presence. And we celebrate that love, those I-thou moments that even transcend time and keep their love alive. Yit gadal v'yit kadash shemei rabbah, be'alma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon v'yomechon, u'v'chayedecho beit Yisrael, ba'agala u'v'zman kari v'yimru amen. Yehei shmei rabbah mevorach le'olam u'lamei maya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shmei dekudsha barichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata. Da'amiran ba'alma v'yimru amen. Yehei shlama rabbah min shemaya. V'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. Oseh shalom v'imromav hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. Zichronam livracha, may their memories be for blessing. Amen.
Good evening. I'm Michael Nathan, president of Larchmont Temple, and I'm thrilled to be here tonight on Shavuot to congratulate the confirmation class of 5782 and their families. I know that this year has been a continuation of the great tradition that Rabbi Serkman has created, where you have spent the year exploring your thoughts of God's presence in our world. When I speak with Rabbi Serkman on Wednesday mornings most weeks, I would often hear about the amazing energy and enthusiasm you all brought on Tuesday night. I know that Rabbi Serkman enjoyed those evenings as much as you did. I actually don't know too much about what happened and what you discussed on Tuesday nights, because as I have been told, including by my two sons, that what happens on Tuesday night at the temple stays at the temple. That said, it was wonderful to hear and read your Sinai statements tonight, and I thank you for adding to this great LT tradition. As you know, life, including your Jewish life, is a journey that began in nursery school at LT for many of you, and one that either began or continued in Kesher and took you through your bar mitzvah, and now you have made another step on the journey with the celebration of confirmation. But as I said, you are on a journey, and I know that you will find many other stops along the way to celebrate your Jewish life. On behalf of the Board of Trustees, I would like to wish each of you a Mazel Tov.
Awesome, right? What other word could we say? It's just awesome to witness this and to be part of it. For all of us listening, for your thoughtfulness, your insights, your discoveries, your parents, grandparents, siblings, other relatives, your congregational family. Hearing what you think and believe is just a wonder to witness. The journey that the 20 of you have been on since September, searching through those centuries of God thinkers, every night a different thinker, sometimes a name you couldn't quite pronounce, sometimes a dark room, sometimes lying on the floor, sometimes blindfolded with something put in front of you and you got to figure out what it is and you're not supposed to talk, even though you do because you can't stop talking, has led you to this Sinai moment. It is Shavuot, after all, the day God gave Torah to the people of Israel, and whenever we struggle with its meaning, wonder about its words, and try to figure out how it informs our lives, we receive Torah all over again, as you have tonight. But for you as a class, this is nothing new, because without even being aware of it, you've been making something magical, even sacred, happen all year long. By being open to the process and confronting the questions, by being supportive of each other. Not all of you being friends, close friends, though you've grown up together, not all of you even being in the same school, all of you learning and being able to listen and appreciate other perspectives, not your own, not to judge, but to hear and to be open. By reaching out, by struggling yourself, by connecting and growing, you have transformed confirmation from a group of 20 to what I would call the 21 Club. Now, you guys are way too young to know what the 21 Club is, but once I was at an interfaith council meeting of New York City, and it was at the 21 Club, which I thought was a really strange setting for a bunch of clergy. The 21 Club was actually a Prohibition-era speakeasy. Right? Do you know what a speakeasy is? Well, all the adults are ready, and the kids are going, I don't know what a speakeasy is, right? It's a place you went to have a drink when you weren't supposed to have a drink, and you had to go through the back door, or there was a trap door, right? It's at, I think, West 52nd Street, yes. But the holy happening is not at the 21 Club, it's here. But you guys are only 20 altogether. Evie was under the weather, right? And Brody is at her brother's graduation at Williams. So why the 21? Because by listening and thinking and struggling with what God might be, you have opened your hearts and let God in. which is just an amazing thing. You are our best hope for a Jewish tomorrow. But I have to leave you with this one last assignment. How do we start every class? Open your Breed books to the next available page. Your Breed books are, of course, your journals or diaries that you write in every week, oftentimes with key music paired. Maybe the Indigo Girls, maybe a little James Taylor, maybe Christ Does Nash and Young, maybe some song you don't even know. I'm not going to play a song, but I'm going to tell you this. Don't stop writing in your metaphorical Breed books. Don't stop looking around at the world. Don't settle for easy answers. And most of all, confirmands, remember Rabbi Akiva. God is not found by looking up, but by looking out and in. The gift of tonight for me is awesome because as much as I may have opened you to and taught you, you've taught me more than you will ever know. And so I thank you for being who you are and for being able to spend every week with you. It is an amazing privilege and a gift. I would honestly say, and just let's keep it between us, it's the most important thing I do out of anything I do at Larchmont Temple. Don't tell any bar mitzvah kids that. They're going to be very upset about that. But don't think it ends. Diner Dialogue with Reb Cirque, Thursdays, 8 Thursdays in the fall, 8 Thursdays in the early spring, late winter into spring, starts October 13th at the Nautilus, 6 to 7. As I told you, I expect you there. Please don't wear these robes. You will look very silly. It's an amazing dialogue, and I know you'll be there. You order anything you want, and we bless it because we bless all food, and we'll even use Abby's suggested formula. It'll be great. On behalf of your families, your LT family, realize our pride in each one of you is exceeded only by our love. We cannot wait to see what you discover next and where your search leads and how you continue, hopefully, to let God in. Mazel tov. We now have special gifts, and I'm going to call on our Director of Education, Youth, and Families, Rabbi Eve Rudin, to have you receive your confirmation Bible, your certificate, and to stay up here for our closing song.
Hi, everyone, and a mazel tov to all of you. I'm reminded of a saying that we have in Pirkei Avot, what's called the ethics of our fathers, that you're supposed to acquire yourself a teacher, acquire yourself a friend, and judge every person justly and rightly. And I have not known all of you since you were in nursery school, but I did calculate that I have known most of you since you were fourth graders. And that you lived through some changes in religious school to Kesher, used to be called students, now you're called learners. You probably all thought it was Michigas, but it's been really a joy to see all of you have this experience of having such wonderful teachers, and for all of you to build relationships and be friends and to treat one another in a covenantal way, as we always do here at Larchmont Temple. So I am going to call up each of your names. I'm going to warn you, it's alphabetical by last name. So I hope that you can figure all of that out. And I was watching the cantor. She sings off an iPad now. Like long ago, there was paper music. So we're giving you the real book, the real Tanakh. It's Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, so it's still a real book. You can also get it online, but we're giving you the real book. So Cooper. William, but Bill. Jonah. Leah, you're getting it, but we'll give it to you. Jack.
We rise.
Join me for our closing song, L'chilach. L'chilach, to a land that I will show you. Lech lecha, to a place you do not know. L'chilach, on your journey I will bless you, and you shall be a blessing, and you shall be a blessing, and you shall be a blessing. L'chilach, and I shall make your name great. Lech lecha, and all shall praise your name. L'chilach, to the place that I will show you. L'simchat chayim, l'simchat chayim, l'simchat chayim, l'chilach. And you shall be a blessing, you shall be a blessing, you shall be a blessing. L'chilach. Chag Sameach.